having worked with it for all these years and seen what's been happening, all the initiatives, climate ministries and faculties working with sustainability, businesses trying to work with circular economy, triple bottom line, 17 sustainable development goals, all the COPs, 26, 27 COPs. Now we're going to 28th COP. And CO2 emissions are still rising.
Yes. Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. This is Joachim from Green Innovation Group speaking. We are hosting the podcast and are a management consulting company working only with sustainability in healthcare, pharma and medtech. And today is an exciting episode. I'm joined by Karen Blincoe, who has worked for decades within sustainability in design and much more. She has her new book out, The Ultimate Human Challenge, about achieving sustainability. And we get really deep and all around and also talk about her personal development and how sustainability became a meaningful factor in her work life. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, Karen, to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. It's so good to have you here. You are really experienced. You've been working in the field of sustainability for a long time. So if you could introduce yourself to the listeners.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for inviting me. I think it's a great privilege to be able to talk about the book and my work. And you're right, I have been around for a long time. I think I've been working with sustainability, or I would say then environmental issues, since the 80s upwards.
What got you curious back then to first start entering this field?
Well, I was actually trained as a graphic designer in England. And I set up a studio in Little Venice in London. I had a design studio there. And I was a very classical graphic designer. I did corporate identities and, packaging for Safeways and brochures for Marks and Spencers. And I did some sign systems for Wimbledon tennis and this and that. But I got bored with it.
Okay.
I think there were two things that really got me thinking about whether that's really what I wanted to do. I think one was I was doing an identity for a firm of 21 lawyers. So I dealt with people who had weird ideas about what they liked and what they didn't like.
Okay.
And I thought, I can't be done with this. And, a friend of mine who also worked in our studio, she did an identity for Sun Alliance. And I think she must have done like 250 different versions of this identity, this logo type. And I thought, that's not me. I just can't do that. And I started getting quite depressed. And I had a team of people. But when I came, because we used to live out in the country, it took about an hour and a half to drive in. I just couldn't face going to the studio. I had to go and have a coffee first and read the paper before I could just get my act together. And I thought there's something wrong here, something not right.
Yeah.
Then I was inspired by two people. Niels Peter Flint, I don't know if you have heard about him. He's the grand old man of sustainability in Denmark.
All right.
He trained as a product designer and architect, worked for Sotsas in the 60s, and he got really fed up with all that stuff they had to produce. So he created like an European design network called O2 Design. And I read about him and I thought, environmental design, addressing all these negative sides from globalization that started to occur at that time. I thought that was interesting. And he was crazy, wonderful, crazy guy. And all the people he used to get together We used to meet in wonderful, strange places and have wonderful conversations about the environment and the future and the world. And I got really interested in that time. So I was the O2 in UK at that time. Then I was inspired by Anita Roddick, who started the Body Shop. Because my boss at that time, we created the Body Shop identity. And we created the first packaging that she produced. And we kitted out her first shops in Chichester, Brighton, and Piccadilly Circus in London. And she was larger than life.
All right.
She walked her talk. All the business, the supply systems she set up around the world with villages growing lavender and other villages growing other things. And she was just going 100 miles an hour, 24/7. And she totally believed in what she did. And she totally believed in reducing resources and reducing packaging. She was the first business ever who started the refill system. She was also the first business ever who started having campaigns like anti-animal testing and things like that. And she was also the first company who printed an annual report on recycled paper and used vegetable-based inks and things like that. And at that time, that was really what I, as a graphic designer, could work with, like recycled paper, vegetable-based printing inks, and reducing packaging and things like that. Because it was about landfill sites. It was about packaging.
Yeah.
It was about pollution, acid rain, and issues like that came up. But it was not about climate change in those days.
Yeah. So sustainability actually became what gave you the meaning back to your working life that you lacked in that period.
That's correct.
That's very interesting.
The environmental issues that then I went back to Denmark as head of Institute with Danmarks Design School in those days, when it was at Finsens, out at the old Finsen place, and we worked with environmental issues there. We used to have courses that dealt with that. But it was not until I came to do a course in 1998 at Schumacher College in Devon that I was introduced to sustainability as such. Sustainability was launched in 1987. Schumacher College was established in 1992 as a kind of an answer to the negative sides of globalization. They created this platform where global visionaries could come in and talk about their ideas about sustainability, whether it was politics or science or astrology or spirituality or you name it. They created this platform to gather all that knowledge in one place. And I was there in 1998. And I thought, I have to set up a center like that in Denmark.
Yeah.
Center for Sustainability. And because I was from a design background, I thought it had to be in design context. So that's what I worked on.
Yeah.
And tried to set up. So that was how I started, really, in terms of...
And what a journey it has been. And now you have a new book out.
It's not a new book, it's the book.
It's the book, even better. I love it.
It's the book. My first book.
Yeah.
And it's really based on a PhD that I started.
Yeah.
I set up this ISIS center in Denmark, and that was very successful. It was in 2000. And based on that success, I got asked to apply for a job as director at Schumacher College, where I had got the original inspiration from, to apply for the directorship there, which I got. And I was there for about 3 years. But it was in the recession, 2008, 2009. We were going to sell up and move to England. We couldn't sell. We had a farm in Hornbæk. We couldn't sell it. My husband didn't have any work. He was a designer. He's still a designer. And I couldn't sit down there on my own. So it was about, this is my life about career or family? And I had to choose family.
Okay. That was a dilemma at the time.
Well, it was a dilemma.
Yeah.
Because being director of Schumacher College at that time was just, for me, the most amazing thing you could be if you're working with sustainability.
Yeah.
But I actually resigned and came back just when we were having COP15 in Denmark. And I thought, is this the end of my career? I've achieved what I really want to achieve, and what next? I thought I can jump off the nearest bridge, or
hopefully not. Yeah.
Or I thought, no, you better use your intelligence rather than your emotions here. And because it was a hell of a job to give up, because all the greatest thinkers came there.
Yeah.
And suddenly I didn't have a title, your ego. I didn't have a salary, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I thought, okay, at that time I was visiting professor in Brighton University in England. And I thought, well, perhaps I should write a book. And I talked to them, and then I thought, well, perhaps to be able to do that, I need to broaden my knowledge field of sustainability.
And what's the sort of, what's the key question that you ask yourself in this book?
It's whether sustainability is possible. Because having worked with it for all these years and seen what's been happening, all the initiatives, climate ministries and faculties working with sustainability, businesses trying to work with circular economy, triple bottom line, 17 sustainable development goals, all the COPs, 26, 27 COPs. Now we're going to 28th COP. And CO2 emissions are still rising.
Yes. Yeah, and we have an oil CEO as the head of the COP28. We have a climate change denier as the head of the World Bank.
So that's, I thought, from my perspective, sustainability is the most logical next step of the ladder of human evolution, because we've shown what we can create, a material world without comparison. Our technological advance, our advance within the healthcare. So what's next? And to me, the next thing is to be Homo sapiens, to find a way where we can live in perfect harmony with that natural base that sustains us. Who would be so stupid as to undermine what sustains us? So I could not understand why so much resistance. And that's what I was been trying to address in the book.
That's the perfect title then, Achieving Sustainability, the ultimate human challenge.
Yeah, because I totally believe it is.
Yeah, and it's something that I have a friend who used this phrase as well, that it's a mandatory task, or it's a given task. Is you simply we can't opt out as humanity, whether we like it or not. And I agree with you that when you're working in this field of sustainability, and I haven't been at it nearly as many years as you, but you're constantly swinging back and forth between pessimism and optimism, because on the one hand you're meeting these wonderful people who are doing great things in their organizations, who are developing new products, and progress really is happening on the micro level, and at the same time either it's not happening nearly fast enough, or as we're seeing in the circular economy is actually going backwards as well. So it's a very mixed set of feelings I've found to be a professional in this field.
It is, and you have to wake up every morning and say, is my glass half empty, is it half full? Because if you can very easily think this is absolutely hopeless, there's just no hope.
Yeah.
If you look around you. And war, I mean, at this day and age, at this advanced level of humanity, what on earth are they doing? Why are they not sitting down talking? What's wrong with that? Instead of burying yourself behind your barricades of weapons, sit down with everybody and talk and talk and talk and talk until you find a solution. Because killing people now, it's obsolete. And I come from, I think we should be beyond that. So you really have to.
Yeah. What's your diagnosis in the book? So I think it's an amazing question. Why hasn't this happened yet? What kind of diagnosis are you putting on humanity?
Several things. One is I started looking at all the barriers, and they're both visible and hidden.
Yes.
And you find barriers everywhere. You find barriers in the political field, in the financial field, in the industrial field. You find barriers in technology because the government is relying on technology to solve the problems. And they're relying on technology that hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah, which is a huge issue.
That's a huge issue. And you find it in culture. If you think about how the religions have evolved, and if you think about Christianity and how our Danish traditions have evolved around, if you think about Christmas and Easter and birthdays and weddings and all meat consumption, consumer-based, in terms of consumption, consumer products. I mean, our whole culture is based on a specific way of living our lives, which is not particularly sustainable. No. So culturally, there are also barriers, and for example, just a simple thing like meat. Denmark is a meat-eating country, and has always been meat-producing country, and then to come in and tell people, you're not supposed to, you're not allowed to eat meat anymore. You can imagine how people are just reacting. So there is a kind of a silent resistance. The other thing I feel, because there is difference between people in the cities and people in the country. I live in the country. And there is a resistance to putting up windmills on land in the country because people do not want them in their backyard. They don't want to look at them. They don't want to hear the whoosh, the noise from the windmills, and they're actually making groups to resist setting up windmills, which is actually going against everything that the government is trying to do. So there is that inherent resistance from people because we cannot see. It's another barrier. There is no vision of the future that we all can live into. When I talk about utopian ideas here, and in many of the small intentional communities that have been created around the world, small groups of families have got together and they say, we want to live in a different way. We want to create this kind of community. We want, and especially in terms of sustainability, we want the heating system to be like that, the waste system to be like this. We want the gardens to be for children, for the elderly. We want to create this, and then they go out and create it. And they create it collaboratively because people can see, this is something we would like. And they can see their own role in it, and they can see their own place in it. When the government tells us zero emissions 2045, okay, what does that mean? I mean, what does that mean? Where's the vision? What does Denmark look like in 2045? So I advocate that the government sits down, makes a master plan, backcasting, if they really mean what they say. Backcasting from 2045 to now. I know that the technology that they want may not have been invented yet. In 20 years ago, the world was different.
But we have all the technology that we need. It's just not rolled out and implemented.
That's right. So if they create a master plan and say sort of every 3 or 5 years, we will have done this, and then we'll have done this, so that we can see the sense in what they're doing. I think the Danish population would be much more say, yes, okay, let's do it. Let's eat. Let's just eat meat twice a week, or let's just take the bus more often, or we're in this together. But it's not happening. That hasn't happened yet.
No. That's a key challenge, and then there's always the question of scale, that a lot of the solutions that have been made in these smaller communities of 50 families or whatever it is, do they scale, and is that how we want to live our life? My business partner Frederick, who you also know and is frequently on the podcast, that was exactly the realization he had, standing in mud, knee high in the Mexican countryside, trying to build an eco village, and he was like, okay, we're never going to get people to do this. So we I think I guess that's what you're touching upon here as well, an often underlooked way is that for us to make the right decisions, we also need to have the right options, and they need to be attractive and easy to use. So Tesla is an obvious example that, of course, some people bought it because it was an environmental friendly car, or more environmentally friendly. But a lot of people also just bought it because it was fast and looked cool. And it's the same that we need to make the right options attractive. And I think it's especially interesting in healthcare as well, because if we go down to the supermarket, we have quite a lot of agency. We would like better vegetarian options and so on, but there are options and we can choose. If you get put in the hospital, or you go to your general practitioner, if you have a chronic disease, you're using insulin every day, you don't really have a say. You have either you have no choice because you're just in the hospital, or you have very few companies to pick your medicine from. So I think there's an enormous responsibility for healthcare systems, pharmaceutical companies, and so on, to take that responsibility, because we can't expect otherwise we're putting it on the patients, and they can't really take that responsibility because they don't have any agency. They don't get to make any choices.
That's true. It's really important, and I think that, just reflecting on you working with sustainability in the healthcare sector. One thing is compliance and supply chains, and how the external functions are dealt with. There are many models for that. But when you think about healthcare in terms of making people healthy, that is another whole sustainability focus. I have several friends who have actually cured themselves from diabetes by changing their diet completely. And I have other friends who have cured themselves by thinking in a different way, living in a different way, changing their lifestyles. And I think that in terms of in the healthcare, I think there has to be more options in terms of getting healthy rather than just eating pills all the time. So I think there's another interesting aspect in the healthcare into how do we become holistic there.
Yeah, shifting to more preventive measures, I would definitely agree with.
Yes.
I think it's still very important that we have an evidence-based approach.
Absolutely.
But of course, there are also many things that are very difficult to get evidence on. There are many things that we have well integrated into the healthcare system, like chiropractors or different kinds of manual manipulation, where there's very little evidence, and it's also extremely hard to create that evidence, because it comes so individual between the practitioner. But I definitely agree that, and I think we talk a lot about that here on the podcast as well, that in the Western countries, we can keep having the healthcare systems that we have today, tomorrow, because then they're going to break. And in fact, they're already breaking because our populations are getting older, and demand that we have for the healthcare systems are higher. So we need to be more preventive there. But then if you're looking at the developing world, it's even more severe because we in the Nordics, for instance, we are spending around 10% of the GDP, the 10% of the economy on healthcare. And that means that a lot of our environmental footprint is coming from the healthcare industry. And the healthcare industry already would be the 5th largest country in terms of CO2 emissions. But if all the countries that are still developing, and thankfully they are, and fast, if they are going to implement the healthcare systems that we have, then the planet is going to break. We simply can't do the green transition without getting the healthcare system on board. What are some of the, besides the utopian thought and daring to be concrete and specific on what we want the world to look like, what are some of the other solutions, or at least forward-pointing ideas that you bring in the book?
Well, I have 3 cases. One is Samsø, renewable energy island. One is Novozymes, biotech company. And one is a faith organization called Brahma Kumaris. They have a center in Frederiksberg here, Copenhagen. 3 very, very different units. And they have all been going through a transition, a green transition, specifically with a focus on the environment. And I thought, and approximately around more or less the same time, from the end 1900, from 1997 to 2010, 15, something like that. And I interviewed the environmental leaders and their staff to find out what the process was. How did they start? How did they develop? What were the key success factors? And what were the key barriers and the problems that they found? And it was very interesting talking about what's in it for me factor that existed in all 3 cases. You know, for example, Samsø, the renewable energy island. It took, I think, rather than 10 years, took 7 years. It was started by Svend Auken, and the islanders took it on and got the renewable energy island in 7 years. And they were totally focused, and the islanders were all involved.
So the renewable energy island, that means that they are running completely on renewable energy?
With windmills, solar power, biomass, etc.
And Samsø is a small Danish island.
Small Danish island, and they succeeded. But the process, again, was the heart, the mind, the wallet, they said. And then they were asked, I asked them, so what was most important? The heart, the mind, the wallet. Because this process assured the survival of the island, because the island had lost a lot of citizens, a lot of their productivity had gone down, the slaughterhouse had closed, and other things. So this new initiative, which they actually financed themselves, this new initiative secured new jobs, new training, secured the future for the island. It actually has brought them a lot of attention worldwide. So they have, I think the tourist industry in Samsø now is about 100,000 visitors a year. The the group who started and led this transition changed into the Energy Academy, which is in existence there now. And they actually have 4,000 to 6,000 visitors a year, people who come from around the world to look at what they did.
All right.
So they are high up, and then they got an award, I think that was in Glasgow, for being a energy pioneering island. So they have actually benefited greatly from this transition process. And Novozymes, which you probably know, has done very well, and I would be very interesting to see what they're doing now with their fusion with the other company. So that would be very. But they again, I interviewed the group who started the green transition there, and again it was became high profile company. Green business was good business. And they achieved not only that they sold more products, but they also became an advisor to other companies in the same kind of field, so that they could go in and talk widely about how they had, what did we do that worked.
Yeah, and what I really love about Novozymes and why I think they're a good model is that they've found a way to make their core business inherently sustainable, or at least more sustainable than the alternatives, where Novozymes is a Danish life science company that sells enzymes to use in a lot of different things, washing powder and soap and also some food ingredients. They derive them from a lot of nature-based compounds and grow them in as enzymes, which is a lot more sustainable way than doing it chemically. What's amazing about that is that every time a customer buys a product from them, the world is a little bit better off than if they had done it from a traditional competitor. And that's one of the pinnacles of sustainability for me, is that you find a business model and a product line where whenever the customer buys something, the world actually gets better. Not just that we are
doing a little bit better,
screwing a sustainability strategy on the side of our other strategy, but that we're actually in the core services a product that we are delivering, that when that happens, the world gets better.
Yes, I think it's a very good business case, Novozymes, and very admirable in a way, the way they did it. And I think one of the key components, both for the energy island Samsø and for Novozymes, was they had a very strong principle and value base. For Novozymes, because of being a daughter of Novo Nordisk, they already obviously had the idea of sustainability and of ethical, of being responsible, doing responsible business. But they actually had a very strong value of being transparent. No matter what, they would be transparent. They would open up to scrutiny from outside. And I think that trustworthiness was very important for Novozymes' advance. And also their dedication to scientific, evidence-based, they have about 700 products. And based on the enzymes, and the fact they were very highly scientific, highly professional. I think that even the competition had to respect the company.
How do you have any advice on how to create such a strong value base? Because we all walk through the halls of some company, and there's the free values on the wall, and sometimes they're not necessarily lived, or sometimes they are lived, and then it's amazing. So how would you go about creating and integrating those values?
Well, if you look at Novozymes, they had these values because they believed in them.
Yeah.
You had leaders who believed in these values. Because it's no good having these values, doing greenwashing and pretend you're transparent, then you're not transparent. That is really not very good business. But Novozymes, because they had they had this inherited vision from Novo Nordisk, which they adopted, and they had visionary leaders, and the sustainability director, head of corporate sustainability, was highly educated, had PhD in the field, highly connected, and totally dedicated. And this again, we talk about this hero thing. It's really important. Transparent, focused, professional leadership is so important if you want to create a transition like that. Because not only do you have to know what you're about, but you also have to instill respect by your colleagues and the directors above you. So I think you need to walk your talk.
Yeah.
You can't say you're a transparent company if you're not a transparent company. So don't take on these values if you can't live up to them, basically.
No, I think that's a great point. And I sometimes see the fear of greenwashing in large companies actually become a barrier to do good sustainability work. Because they're so afraid of being called out in the media that sometimes they end up stopping up. And that's a shame. So my advice there is always that you don't have to tell anybody about it unless it's something that you're really sure of. But you have to still keep trying. But it just shouldn't be a marketing exercise. It should be a normal, operational, business-driven approach.
And that's what happened in Novozymes. Everything that they advocated, they integrated in their business model. And I think that's why it became successful, because there was a kind of a cohesion in what the company said it would do and what it did.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much part of its success. And also having highly dedicated, focused, educated people to take on the sustainability agenda. I think to begin with, they had a sustainability board where all the presidents and vice presidents would gather, and the head of sustainability would propose new ideas, etc. And after a while, I think in 2013, 14, 15, sustainability became a totally integrated part of the whole company. They believed in it. They could see that it produced the profit. They could see that it gave Novozymes a kind of value worldwide that was really commendable, and everybody else was kind of envious about. So I think focus, dedication, transparency, walk your talk.
Obviously, keywords.
Keywords.
Yeah.
Even also with Samsø, you couldn't. People know if you're not authentic after a while. You can cheat them for a period of time, but not in the long run.
Is it? I think is it Bob Marley that you can fool some of the people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
And I think we see this now. I don't know if you heard the recent news about who is the blackest fossil fuel company in Denmark now, and I thought that was interesting, very interesting. I don't want particularly to mention names. I was also listening to World Economic Forum, some of those speakers, also food for thought, I would say.
Yeah, I think some of the things that make me optimistic in the healthcare industry and other places are that we're getting hard regulation with the EU taxonomy. That's an accounting standard. It simply becomes part of your accounting. That we are seeing that the healthcare systems are setting quantifiable goals and translating them into the procurement department. So again, speaking with the wallet, and then just the internal talent demands that it's really expected from employees nowadays and from partnerships.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah. Yes,
in
please.
terms of, because I don't know all the healthcare companies, which ones are really sort of leading the field in terms of and why are they leading the field?
That's a great question. I think if you look out at the landscape, the situation is like this, that for the large multinationals, almost all of them have set corporate sustainability goals. Many of them have signed up for Science-Based Target Initiative, and at least formally at a board level and at C-level, there's a buy-in and there's set goals. So that's sort of at the top end. And then you would have, in those same organizations, local heroes or small teams who've done amazing initiatives, donating non-used medical equipment from clinical studies to local clinics, or optimizing at production sites. But there's a huge gap in between there for most companies where it's not really integrated into the operating model. There's still, sustainability-wise, it's understaffed. There's not enough resources. The corporate sustainability strategy is not really translated into local KPIs with specific people who are responsible for it, and also where there's created a local strategy for this business division or this product line or this platform that says, okay, how are we going to use this as a value driver in our unit? What's also often you will have done materiality assessments at the large corporate level, very high level, where are CO2 emissions coming from, where are environmental footprints, but not at the local levels, which makes it harder to take action. And that's, I would group the majority of the multinationals there. Then you have a few outliers, some which are running ahead, and it also depends a little bit. You would have some where they're very far ahead in production, but not necessarily in clinical trials, or others who are very far ahead in R&D in clinical trials, but maybe not as much. And then you have also still a substantial group, especially in the not the multinational, but like the step below in the SME segment, where they're still dragging their feet and sort of, and I think coincidentally, some of the divisions, generally speaking, that most need to get going is really the commercial teams. Because the healthcare systems and the procurement departments are setting demands around this now, they're living in that reality now. But if you come out as a salesperson or go-to-market person and you're not conversational around sustainability, you can't show around your product line your sustainability stats. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to be conversational, and you have to have the communication lines internally in your company so you can ask for data and so on. And so there's a massive need for the commercial teams for how to use this as a lever to win in that new marketplace, and to train their salespeople and build that new or integrate sustainability into their sales model.
It just brings me to another barrier, and that is lack of education. You know, because it's not part of school general education right now. So it means sustainability is interpreted, misinterpreted, and used in all sorts of contexts where it actually doesn't belong.
Yes.
And you know, you have bæredygtig landbrug, for example. It's got absolutely nothing to do with having a sustainable agriculture, and so you have a lot of that. Yeah. So you're talking about training. This field is developing all the time, so it's quite a task to keep up with what's happening now, and to be able to then train
Yeah,
staff
definitely. Yeah, and both the general sustainability principles, but
Yes.
also in my function, you mentioned being a designer. So,
Yes.
what's important for me? How can and just developing a sense of what's important. That from a CO2 perspective, it doesn't matter that the packaging for the ox meat is made out of recycled plastic if you're still eating a lot of ox meat from a CO2 perspective. At
It's
least.
very, very difficult to negotiate through that, isn't it? What is good and what is bad? Am I not allowed to take the plane to London, or what? Or can I not go? What, it's... And I think that is also one of I see the barrier, the lack of cohesion.
Yes.
It's fragmented. Then you do a bit here, and then there's a bit there, and then there's something over there, and then you do something there. And people are totally confused.
Yeah, and they don't have a sense of proportion where they don't do that materiality assessment. No. Then they'll be like, great, now we have reusable cups from bio something in this, and that's fine and great, but it's really just awareness. It doesn't matter if the big parts of your CO2 emitters, the way you work with suppliers or whatever it might be, they don't do anything about that.
Yes. I was just thinking, for example, with Novozymes, I would think none of the cases that I have in the book there are 100% sustainable. It's just not possible because you have all the supply streams. And the staff, is also important in that leaning, in that equation, in that, do the staff drive to work? Do they bike to work? Do they take buses to work? And what's their lunchtime, the canteen, as you were talking about earlier, what kind of food do you eat? And all of that behavior is also part of it. And I think it's complex. It's a complex field.
Yes,
but I think that we are slowly, when I listen to what you guys are doing and other people are doing around the world in terms of systematizing the monitoring and the assessments and in evaluating the results, I think we are moving in the right direction.
I think so too. Let us stop on that positive note with our glasses half full. And thank you so much for coming, Karen, and best of luck moving forward. You obviously still have a lot to contribute with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello, Joachim from Green Innovation Group here again. Really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, would really appreciate if you would follow the podcast on your podcast app if you're not doing it already. That means a lot to me and means that we can keep prioritizing making shows for you guys. Thank you for all the good sustainability work that you are doing out there, and thank you for listening. I really appreciate each and every one of you listening. Take care.